Hi, good afternoon. As Brian just announced, I am indeed Dan Stanton, the editor and founder of Bioprocess Insider, an online publication focused on delivering daily news and analysis about the biomanufacturing sector. We launched actually about a year ago as part of the Bioprocess International Business Portal, and I'm delighted to be chairing this panel today. Okay, so when Novartis' Kymriah was approved in 2017, the then FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb described regenerative medicine as being no longer the stuff of science fiction. Since then, we've had Kite Gilead's Yescarta becoming the second CAR-T therapy to enter the market. Spark Therapeutics received regulatory success with its gene therapy Luxturna, and just a couple of weeks ago, actually, Novartis, through its acquisition of Avexis, saw its SMA gene therapy Zolgensma win approval. At the same time, there are more than 800 active cell-based or directly administered gene therapy INDs currently on file, and according to the FDA, by 2025, there will be 10 to 20 cell or gene therapy products reaching approval every year. So cell and gene therapies are now essentially a proven entity. But as more products leave the clinic and enter commercialization, new questions emerge. Is there enough manufacturing capacity? How do firms reduce costs and increase manufacturing efficiency? Should a firm build its own capabilities or use a third party? What benefits can a third party, a CDMO, actually bring in this space? So we're going to try and look at some of these questions and more in this panel. And I would like now to actually go along the panel and let the panelists introduce themselves and just give us a very brief overview of the companies that you represent. So if we start with Felix at the end.
Yeah, hi, I'm Felix Hugh. I'm the Senior Vice President and Global Head of the Advanced Therapy business for WuXi AppTec. For those of you who don't know WuXi, it's actually a pretty diversified company. We have 6 platforms, a small molecule platform, a cell and gene therapy platform, a biologics manufacturing platform, a genetics platform, a medical device platform, and then the last one is we just recently created a diagnostic business. The advanced therapy business has 2 primary locations. The headquarters is in Philadelphia, and then we also have a China facility. We have PD labs in Shanghai, and then a manufacturing facility in Wuxi City. And I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Thanks, Felix.
Hi, my name is Sönke Brunswick. I'm the VP for Cell and Gene Therapy at Salonik. Salonik is a CDMO with 25 years experience in biologics, with 2 facilities, one in Basel, the other one in Heidelberg. In Basel, we are now building a new facility for cell therapies and gene vectors.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Reininger. I'm the Director for Cell and Gene Therapy at Lathan Biofarm Group. We're a life sciences consulting firm with offices in Cambridge, Mass. and Baltimore, Maryland, not Massachusetts. We actually work with both sides of the fence. We work with innovator companies to support their product development efforts. In many instances, it is focused on CMOs and identification of manufacturing capabilities. And then we've also been working on market research initiatives with products in the space and pipelines, and looking at capacity analysis for viral vector demand along with versus the commercial capacity.
Hi, I'm Joe Vitale. I'm the Director of Account Management at Hitachi Chemical. My background is hematology, medical oncology. I've spent many years developing CAR-Ts and other cell therapies. Recently shifted into account management as we see there's a growing need for the client engagement process for CDMOs to be managed properly. Hitachi Chemical, as many of you may know, we're a cell and gene therapy manufacturing organization. We have our North American region, which consists of a manufacturing center in the San Francisco area and 2 facilities in New Jersey, not too far from here. We have our facility in Munich, Germany, which is Apseth, and then our facility in Yokohama, just about 15 miles out of Tokyo. And we do process development, clinical manufacturing, and intend on doing commercial manufacturing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if you hadn't noticed, Bruce Levine has been unable to attend, although his name is up there. So we have a panel consisting of 4 CDMOs operating in the cell and gene therapy space. I guess my first question for you all is the list of recent approvals that I mentioned in my introduction. From these approvals, have you seen confidence in the industry grow? Are you seeing more demand for your cell and gene therapy services, and are you seeing that demand actually being converted into business? So, Felix, if you want to take that start.
Yeah, we're seeing more demand, both on the cell and gene therapy side. I think the demand comes from a couple of different spots. One is, if you looked at the ARM data from the end of 2018, they raised $13.3 billion in this industry. The prior 3 years was 20, so there's actually more money that was raised in 2018. So you see demand from a lot of the new companies that have been set up. But then you've got a number of companies going later phase, and the demand is picking up as their patient volumes go up for the later phase. And then the other aspect we're seeing is in a number of these areas, especially if you're looking systemic indications for things like AAV, where there's basically a production run a patient, you're seeing demand. So all of those areas are pushing up the demand for manufacturing production and also for PD work. So,
Sonka, have you seen similar sort of demand for the services that you offer as industry gets more and more confident with these modalities?
Yeah, maybe let me try again to explain that we are starting new in this field. So we're building a facility now. But of course, this is one of the reasons why we see that this is a very interesting service for us as a more reputed CMO coming from the biologics, now entering into the cell and gene therapy space.
So really, yeah, as you say, this is the demand is driving your entry into this space then.
Yeah.
Joseph, your thoughts on the demand and the increase in confidence within the market?
Well, yeah, I think there's definitely an increase in the market. The approval of products is a primary driver for that. There's a regulatory pathway now that's been established. And another element to it that hasn't been brought up yet is that the clinical time frame from first in human to getting approval is being condensed down. So Zolgensma, I believe, was in the clinic for 5 years from when it first went into approval. BioMarin is on track to possibly garner approval for a hemophilia gene therapy. That product will have been in the clinic a total of 6 years. So there's a major push to, and I think part of the emphasis and the growth of the space is that there's a condensed time frame from getting into people through and getting through to the agencies and impacting patients.
Joe, you're nodding at that. I'm just wondering why there is this condensed time frame. Why things are moving faster through the clinic?
So it's currently in the U.S. a very friendly environment right now. As statements from the FDA have said, they've put out a bunch of guidance documents to help, provide the necessary. I don't want to say guidance again, but guidance and to provide and work through and what's going to be really required. I think moving forward as the space matures, there's going to be a need for more vector as diseases with greater numbers of patients and or the vector requirements, such as in Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, are going to be so much higher than what's currently been approved thus far.
One of the problems with having two Joes sitting next to each other on the panel is you were both nodding. So, Joe Vital, what are your thoughts on, well, first of all, expedited timeframes in the clinic and general demand in the industry?
Absolutely. So with the orphan drug designations, the fast track status, and with so many companies now in the space and so much investor money to go around, cell therapy development companies are under a lot of pressure to get data quickly so that they can get that next series of funding. So CDMOs, the demand there is speed. Yes, building your own facility may be the best choice for you in the long run, but if you need to get your product into the clinic quickly with high quality and expertise, a CDMO is always an excellent option for you to get your feet wet and get you going. We can grow with you strategically all the way into commercialization, but at one moment we may just need to part ways because you built your own facility. But so that's where the demand is right now with the industry, because we're seeing a lot of desire to really just start a clinical trial and start it soon.
Hitachi acquired PCT, so you've got a number of years' experience in cell and gene therapies, as does WuXi, who I believe was one of the first CDMOs to offer cell and gene services, cell and gene therapy services over a decade ago now, I believe. Felix, I'm just wondering if you've seen any change in the type of demand specifically in that decade, or WuXi specifically.
Yeah, so we actually have been doing cell therapy since 2004, and it actually was a very small business for us for a long period of time. And I can say myself and Alan Moore back in 2011-12 started talking to the CEO about, hey, we think this is a space we should be putting some money in. And we were getting very polite response, but no money. Well, what happened is, I think, as people began to see the type of products that were being developed, the CAR-Ts and everything else like that, I think we began to realize this was a space that we needed to play in as a company. And so we have been in it since 2004, but we started really seriously investing in the business starting in about 13 and 14. And so, yeah, we've seen the demand increase a lot. We've seen the funding and the money raised is ridiculous in some respects. I mean, the size of the Series A's today are huge compared to what they were, a few years ago. And I think Joe's right. I think one of the things that is really important is speed. We actually have a term with our customers about that, because you can go phase 1 to phase 2B to commercial approval. We call that catastrophic success, which means you're successful, but now you don't know how to actually take advantage of your success. So we do think that's one of the considerations people have to be thinking about. In a market like that, if you're going to move that fast, can you actually do that if you're doing it yourself? Or do you need a partner and then think later about when you're going to put that in there? So, yeah, it's definitely changed in the last decade.
I do want to talk about some of the benefits a CDMO can bring, which we've hinted at already. But before that, when we look at the success of Kymriah, when we look at Yescarta, both of these are being, primarily made in-house. Novartis and Avexis have invested heavily in their in-house capabilities. Kite and Gilead have done the same thing. Just wondering why these big players have opted to build their own facilities or buy their own facilities rather than use a third-party service. If anyone has any thoughts on that.
Well, I'll say this. They did use third-party services for a period of time. So it wasn't like they actually did use third parties. And then I think what they did is they looked at, especially for the autologous model, and what their forecasts are, the number of suites you have to build to hit the client base you're looking at, you're going to just have to make huge facilities. And they opted to do that rather than try to do that through a CMO, which I understand. But early on, a lot of them did work with CDMOs as they were getting up and running. But
as they push towards commercialization, when Novartis, Kite, Avexis have all made their intentions pretty clear about keeping this sort of manufacturing in-house. Sonka, as someone who's entering the space, is that a worry going forward?
No, absolutely not. I think so. I mean, if you look at the number of clinical trials now, there are more than 1,000 clinical trials, and even a few pharma or biotech companies will build their own facilities. I think the market is still big for a CMO. And as Felix explained, I think even the pharma companies, they always have used a CMO as a partner. And of course, and I think this will still remain for the future.
Joseph and Joe, what are your thoughts about the kind of the initial players here and building their in-house capabilities?
So I don't know about building in-house for the cellular therapies. I think you would need to have a significant number of products in the pipeline to justify the cost of the capital build and then the personnel for the quality systems and building out and establishing all of that in-house. Now, one other aspect is that of the cell and gene therapies, the bulk of them have been developed by initial startup small biotechs, Kite before they were acquired, Unicure with Glybera back in 2012, and Spark, for example. They all small innovator companies that got their product to market. So I think part of it is that, are they going to have enough of an internal pipeline to justify that, to be able to do it? And I think the actual cellular gene therapies are a much more difficult area to go into versus viral vector manufacturing itself.
That's an interesting point on the difference between modalities. And before we look at the modalities themselves, Joe, what are your thoughts on the big players at the moment?
Absolutely, yes. So I agree with everything that's been said so far. The one feedback that we have received in the past is the voice of customer would be that they're looking for more visibility and control. And that's something that you can get at your own when you build your own in-house facility. So having received this and wanting to grow with our strategic partners, we've constructed new facilities that are more client-friendly so that when they're in the facility, it feels like home, where you actually do have an added level of visibility and a level of control. And then, so elements such as that will allow us to, along with building stronger quality systems that apply to all of our clients, will allow us to grow proportionally with them so that we can, when it is time for commercialization, we can grow with them to that stage.
That's interesting how you talk about the elements of control. Obviously, in the pharma industry, full stop, there's the element of risk. And often in a space which isn't quite formed yet, the idea of handing over your manufacturing process to a third party would cause some biopharma companies to run a mile or scream. Is anyone finding any of their clients concerned about their new technologies, the fact that this isn't a proven space yet, and having to use you guys as a CDMO? Is anyone seeing any problems from the end user's point of view there when coming to approach you?
I think a lot of times they come to the CDM because you have the expertise. They're coming to you because you've been doing cell therapies for 8 years. You've worked with 10 different companies for gene therapy or something else like that. So they're coming to you because you understand that, because you have your systems in place, your quality systems in place. I mean, there is one risk where there's a control risk if you give it to a CDMO, but there's a flip side risk that if you do it yourself, and this is what I think people will find out, it's easy to build a building and buy equipment. What's hard is to hire the right people, to get the right systems in, like the right quality systems, and to create the right infrastructure like supply chain and all that other stuff. So you're just trading one risk for another. One is a control risk, but the other risk is, especially with accelerated timelines, can you actually get that done in time? I think what a number of players are doing is they're doing a hybrid mix of using both the CDMO and doing their own. And, for some of the companies we deal with, we'll probably end up doing the early commercial, but as the commercial gets bigger, they'll shift over. So, and as a customer, you do always want to have a second source for manufacturing. So if your site goes down or has a contamination issue or something else like that, somebody else is producing. So I think a number of our customers are really kind of stepping back and figuring out what's the right strategy to drive this thing forward.
So in many ways, the risk itself is being passed on and trusted for the CDMO, for a CDMO to deal with. Joseph, Joe, Sonka, how do you guys, or Sonka, how are you going to? But how do you guys manage the risks that come with fairly unknown entities, which cell and gene therapies are?
Yeah, that's a good point, I think. So, Salonik, with our, let's say, more than 25 years experience coming from biologics, have developed early industry platforms on different cell lines, bioreactor systems, and so on. I think we can bring in the right level of expertise and also to manage the risk of these projects. I think what is really needed in the future is to develop more industry standard manufacturing technologies and platforms. This is, I think, what will be the future for a CMO.
So Hitachi Chemical makes a huge investment into our innovation and engineering department. 2 talks ago was actually Alex Clara from our innovation and engineering department talking about systems, developing automated systems, closed manufacturing, so that we could eliminate a lot of the risk and ultimately provide platforms for our clients, similar to what the biotech industry does. So that's the general, from a manufacturing perspective, how we can prevent risk. From a facility aspect, 20 years of experience. CDMOs just have expertise in managing a facility. So over time, your quality systems just evolve and get sharper and sharper because you do have the benefit of having so many different projects that are very different come into your facility. So you're learning from so many different angles, and it allows you to have this very robust quality system that can manage a variety of risks that I think you don't get if you're just managing one manufacturing process in an in-house facility.
So it's almost a learning curve for yourselves by dealing with so many different customers. Joseph, you find how does Lathan, for example, deal with its customers' risks?
So we try to mitigate the risks by going to and working with our clients to go to and identify the more experienced CDMOs. I think a lot of the risk at this point is that with the rapid expanse of the space, that the overall CMC and biologics manpower and having trained people that know how to operate and make these products is something that's at a very low level and is a very high demand. So I think having experienced operators and people that have done the analytics and the characterization is a key element for it. And ideally, if the innovator company that has the product that's going to a CDMO has a lot of, or can provide some analytical support, I think the risk is associated with manpower and expertise coupled with analytics.
Because of the high risk of these products and the unknown elements of the manufacturing process that we're all still trying to get through, are the nature of the relationships that you have with your clients significantly different to, say, a sort of traditional pharma small molecule CMO client or pharma monoclonal antibody CMO relationship? How are the relationships forming in this space? Okay.
Go ahead.
I think the relationships have to be built off of an understanding that there has to be some level of flexibility. And I think that's key for a CMO, because you will occasionally get an incoming lot that, the apheresis might not be a good input for that process, so you may need to reschedule. So I think from a relationship perspective, there is just, once again, that level of flexibility that is required. I find that as being one of the most important things that make a good partnership work, is when it truly is a dual partnership, and there is an understanding that sometimes I will be able to reschedule your slot and sometimes I won't. And I know that puts a strain on your clinical team, but we're working together on this, and we'll eventually, we'll get there together.
So it's not quite the just booking a slot in the biomanufacturing schedule as it might have been for a monoclonal antibody, for example. Felix, you were going to say about the relationships at WuXi.
Yeah, I was going to say in this space, for it to work well, there has to be a certain level of trust and partnership, because things will go wrong. Just plain and simple, things will go wrong. And if the teams are working together and not blaming each other, but actually looking for the solution that works a lot better than if it's going the other way. The other part is, everybody here, and Joe mentioned that earlier, has got really aggressive timelines. I think everybody comes in and says, my target IND date is this. Of course, you're looking at like, okay, that's not, well, we'll just say it's a stretch to get to. And you're really doing things to try to work it. So you need to be flexible. I think the other part that's important, though, from a CDMO is there's certain areas you can't be that flexible on, because the regulators also want to see that you're in control. So there are some things that you're just going to have to say, you know what, I know you want to do that, but we can't, because the regulators also don't want you making an exception every time a customer comes and says they want to do it this way. So you manage that line between being flexible on one hand and being customer friendly, but also being not so flexible so you meet the demands of what you're expecting when you get audited. So there's that line that you work there also. But I think here, because it's such a developed, it's such an emerging market with such new technology, you really do have to work very closely together with your customers, and it's got to be the best relationships are the partner relationships where there's a high degree of trust because the people like to work with each other.
So trust, flexibility, but not too much flexibility. Joseph?
Yeah, I have one other point. I think a lot of it also needs to be strategic, and that for your manufacturing process, what is your overall goals that you're looking to do? Are you looking to get your phase 1 data and then try to partner the program, and maybe you don't want to go through and have a intensely well-characterized process? But if you're looking to, thinking as an innovator that you're going to take the product through the later stages of development, per Felix's statement, you want to avoid that catastrophe, and perhaps taking a little bit of a slower approach and making sure that your manufacturing platform is selected that's going to be able to support the commercial demand, and working backwards from a commercial, assuming success, that will provide benefits that will actually get you an approval in a more rapid time frame.
I think we've seen in the CMO space the phrase strategic relationships bounded around for years, but the impression I'm getting, this is actually it's necessary to have a strategic partnership in this space rather than just a buzzword to kind of encourage partnerships. Sonka,
I was going to build on his comment here. So let me give you an example of what strategic could be. So you're working with somebody, and you're in phase 1. You talk about what the needs are. They go to phase 2B, and they have a good meeting with the FDA. Now you start saying, okay, if this works, how much capacity are you going to need? How long does it take to get a suite online? What do you think your needs are going to be? And then based upon that, you start putting together a hiring plan, building out the suites, and kind of locking into a lot of that stuff. So if they do have that catastrophic success, it's no longer catastrophic, it's a success because you built that through. And so those are the customers that the ones that are thinking like that are the easiest ones to work with. And then, they realize that they're going to have to make some upfront investments. They're going to have to pay for certain things to get them in place. But when that comes, and if they do have that, they're really, really well prepared. Then they can make the decision on whether or not, over time, to build their own commercial building too. So I think there's a series of things they can do to kind of lay out the strategy so it makes sense, and they're much better prepared. So.
And Sonka, I was just wondering if you started to see these different sort of discussions with some of the customers looking at your future capabilities in the cell and gene therapy space compared to the biologic space.
Yeah. Okay. As Felix said, of course, there is a very high time pressure now in the market for all these projects, because there is a lot of investments. Everybody wants to bring his product on the market. Nevertheless, I think we should also look to deliver on the quality, and also to develop a process which is really robust and scalable in order to being able to manufacture also a product for commercial scale in the future. So I think the only way doing this is to build really long-term relationships with the client, and not only looking to deliver as fast possible. Yeah, I think this is very, very much needed. If you look at biologics, I think there's it's another standard, I think, or situation. than compared to what is now going on in cell and gene therapies.
One of the challenges bounded around about cell and gene therapies is the logistics issue, the importance of the supply chain. What are the benefits that a CDMO can bring in helping an end user manage that critical supply chain? If anyone wants to jump in. Yeah.
So CDMOs traditionally work from a goods in to goods out process. But as CDMOs evolve, we need to become more integrated with couriers and also provide potential softwares that will allow for the more track and trace for our products. So I think that that's from a logistics perspective, by reaching our hands outside just the doors of our organization in order to kind of help manage the logistics aspect for our clients. And then ultimately that delivery platform will widen and widen potentially to other areas such as cryo storage, such as managing some of the clinical aspects of their program. And I think that's the evolution of CMOs. And we are right now at a state in this industry where I want to ask everybody here, would we be here right now talking about this if it wasn't for CMOs?
If anyone wants to jump in and answer that, then feel free.
Would this industry be in this state if it wasn't for contract manufacturing organizations?
Felix, you're not in the audience, but would this industry be here if it wasn't for contract manufacturing organizations?
There's no way you could support all those small companies without CDMOs. Because a lot of these small companies, you've got brilliant scientists who've developed fantastic science and technology. But let's be honest, they don't know how to take what's made in a lab and scale it up into a manufacturing process where they can make large-scale amounts of the product. And so I think you need to have both. But I don't think you could service the number. There's over almost 1,000 companies right now in the cell and gene therapy space. There's no way that all these companies can make their own product and do all those other things without having an intermediary like a CMO to help them out. Now, even the big pharma, I'll be honest with you, this is a new space for them. They're buying their way into this industry. They're not experts in this industry. They're getting the expertise by buying small startups that have the expertise. So they're still working initially up front with the CMOs. I think what people are now doing is they're also asking themselves, is there a capacity crunch, and do we have to start building our own buildings? And that's one of the questions I think you're going to ask. But that's partly because there has been so much actually demand on CMOs right now with the number of new companies that have been created.
It's interesting that you bring up the 1,000 or so companies developing these therapies. Sorry, Joseph, I was just about to ask about whether there's enough capacity amongst the CDMO space to service the demand. Obviously, Sonka, you're jumping into the space to benefit from the increased demand, but where do we stand as far as capacity goes right now?
Okay, we are starting, and if we start really from zero. So we will build now a facility, let's say, in the phase 1, phase 2 scale scenario in the first step. We will be able also to expand to phase 3 or even commercial scale. The facility is located in an industry region where we can easily access to other buildings. This is possible. We also are looking to globalize. We are looking to a footprint in North America. This is where we are now. Yeah.
And I believe you've all expanded your services to help fuel this increased demand. But are you only going to be increasing your services further as time goes by? To anyone who wants to jump in.
So, if I look at the industry right now, I actually think there's 4 constraints. Everybody always talks about, are there enough manufacturing suites? But there are, in my opinion, a constraint around process development. Are there enough people and teams to do the process development? There's also a constraint around analytical development and developing the assays to release it, because does no good to have manufactured product if you can't release it. And the last one, which people don't think about, is there's a constraint on raw materials. So there are some raw materials that have 75-week lead times if you're a new customer, for instance, for something like a hyperstack, right? If you want a custom media, it's 12 to 16 weeks. So on the raw material side, you can have everything else set up and be waiting 3 months for a raw material. So it's kind of coordinating all four of those things to be able to try to help your customer manage the timeline. That's why when people talk about constraints, everybody kind of goes over to the manufacturing capacity. But I actually think there's a bigger constraint on PD and AD because, as somebody mentioned earlier, there's a huge demand for people, but there actually aren't that many enough people who have cell and gene therapy actual hands-on experience. So a lot of us in this room are training the people to get that experience today.
Is anyone finding those constraints being addressed, or are they just getting worse and worse?
I feel in the industry the people constraint is a challenging one, and I do think the cell and gene therapy community probably needs to work closer with local universities or community colleges so that we could have more training, so that we could have more operators, QC analysts. Because I do think that as this wave of new products that are going to be commercialized comes along, there will be a potential drought, a shortage of the talent that we will need in order to meet the manufacturing loads of the industry.
Joseph, you're nodding.
Yeah, I totally agree that a drought or a shortage is definitely, I think it's already here. With CDMOs that I work with, they have, if you go to their websites and look at their careers page, they have a very long list of open positions. And I think that, even higher level positions that people are jumping around and going from place to place. I also wanted to comment that another aspect from a capacity and demand is the element of time and how many batches can any manufacturing facility produce. If you're looking at a viral vector production, for example, it's pretty much a fixed set of time in that you have 6 weeks from when you thaw the cells out to when the vector comes out. And depending on the indication, how many batches are going to be required to fulfill the clinical needs. So I think part of another element is time, based with current yields for the manufacturing processes.
And talking of time, can I get a quick time check, Brian, on... Okay, we do have a few minutes left. This is frustratingly, there's so many different places we could move this conversation, but time is kind of up against us. But I do want to open up the panel to any questions that the audience has. So if there are any quick questions to either individual panelists or to the general panel, then please raise your hands and Brian will run and attack you with a microphone.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on...
Is that on?
Is this better? Okay. Do you think we're going to overshoot on building capacity as these therapies progress through the clinic?
Great question.
I think that's a risk. I think if every CMO goes in and builds capacity and a bunch of these companies build their own capacity, you're going to run into that. I actually think there will be, and you can call me on this, but I see this being like monoclonals 25 years ago. Exactly. I think there will be a fair number of empty facilities for a number of companies that are building facilities right out of the block. If you're building a facility and you haven't even done it phase 1 yet, there's an 85 to 90% chance you'll fail your clinicals. So even just looking at the numbers, there'll probably be a decent amount of empty suites that way. So I don't think it'll overshoot yet, but if everybody keeps building over the next 3 years, yeah, you run that risk. So
I think that's also the case. However, with the monoclonal experience, almost everybody's in a disposable bioreactor, and we're not going to go to the 10,000, 25,000 liter capacity and scale of manufacturing. So I think it'll be tampered a little bit by that. But one of the critical areas for the field, especially with the viral vectors, is the overall yield and capacity and process innovations that are going to come out that are going to boost those yields to be able to better fulfill the demand.
There's a question down. Oh, sorry.
Yes, hi. Amit from GE Healthcare. Thanks for your comments today. I had a question about when you work with clients and they're bringing projects to you, how big of a concern is managing manufacturing disruptions? And kind of the second part to that question is, what strategies do your organizations take to mitigate that risk against manufacturing disruption? How do you instill that confidence in them?
Define manufacturing disruptions, because it's a pretty broad. What are you thinking when you're saying that right now?
Yeah, to me, it's a broad thing. Disruptions could be availability of raw materials. It could be quality issues. It could be personnel. It could be anything related to not meeting your scheduled production plan.
Go ahead.
It's almost the constraints that Felix was talking about before. But Joe?
I mean, from a client engagement process, we'll have a joint project team. Everything, we may have to have ad hoc meetings if an issue comes up, but typically you'll meet weekly. You'll have your project steering meetings to drive more of the bigger decisions, strategic decisions, and to check in on KPIs to make sure things are moving along. But ultimately, as Felix said, there are going to be problems. And what happens is when not to touch a stove after you burn your hand once. So what happens is when you ultimately work with many clients over many years, you learn to manage those disruptions much more efficiently, and the solution. You could troubleshoot it much faster, and that's a lot of the experience that you get from a CMO. They can hold your hand, and it's a difference between being a vendor or a partner and a trusted advisor, and we'll guide you. So that's how we manage it.
You do also have to have a risk management plan in place, right, for things like power failures, contaminations, all those things that come up. You need to put in policies and backup plans for that too, in addition to the constraints that we mentioned earlier. And if you don't have that in there, that means when it happens, you're going to be ad hocing it, which is not the time to try to figure some of those things out. So.
I think there were a couple more questions in the audience, but we have been defeated by time, unfortunately. But I'm sure the panelists will stay around to field any further questions that you have. On that note, I would just like to thank all four of our panelists and everyone for attending. And I think we covered a lot of issues there in the CDMO space, and I just wish we had another 45 minutes or so. But thank you so much.